Welcome back, guys. 80% of you still haven't subscribed. Before we start the video, hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. Coming back from duty was supposed to be quiet. 3 weeks in the Pine Barrens watching what the bosses called strange activity by regular people. They use that phrase to describe something they don't want to explain. And in the fall of 1995, no one was saying anything about Point Pleasant, New Jersey. By the end of September, people had started disappearing. First, a hiker didn't come back from a trail run. Then, a couple camping near old fire roads vanished. Within almost 2 weeks, 5 people had disappeared without leaving any clues, and local police had too many unsolved reports. That's when they decided to bring us in. Captain Warren Holt brought us together in a temporary building that smelled of motor oil and mildew. It was the kind of place the government sets up when it needs to work quietly and quickly. He stood at the front, his jaw tight, a map of the Pine Barrens spread out on the metal table. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice cutting through the low hum of the heater beside him. "We have been given the job of setting up a safety zone around this area. The goal is simple: watch, observe, and report. We must not get involved unless it's absolutely necessary. The local community strongly believes this is a serial killer. The federal agents, however, believe it's a failed drug operation. Command now thinks this is a problem we need to handle." I remember looking around the room. There were 8 of us total, chosen from different units, none of us really connected to each other. That should have been the first warning sign. When they put together a team like that, it usually means they want someone they can make disappear if things go wrong. Sergeant Douglas Dunn sat to my left, playing with a handheld radio, his thick fingers moving over the dials like he was tuning an instrument. They called him Breaker because he could make any radio work, even when it shouldn't work. He was older than most of us, maybe late 30s, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of old leather. Next to him was Private Dean Lasker, the youngest guy in the unit. Fresh out of basic training, barely 20 years old, with that eager look in his eyes that hadn't been beaten out of him yet. He kept looking at the map like he was trying to memorize every trail, every creek, every possible exit route. Smart kid, too smart for what was coming. Lieutenant Sarah Keene stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the rain streak down the glass. She was intelligence, brought in to coordinate the operation and study whatever information we collected. Sharp as a knife and twice as cold. She didn't talk much, but when she did, people listened. Her eyes were the kind that saw through you, the kind that made you check your story twice before you opened your mouth. Holt tapped the map with a pen. "We're setting up 3 observation posts along this ridgeline. Alpha Team takes the north end, Bravo in the middle, Charlie on the south. Radio checks every 2 hours. No exceptions. The weather's going to be terrible, so keep your gear dry and your eyes open. Something's scaring the locals, and we need to know what it is." "What about weapons rules?" Lasker asked, his voice a little too loud in the small room. Holt looked at him like he was deciding whether the question was worth answering. "Standard load. M16s, sidearms, flares. Listen close, Private. We are not here to hunt. We are here to watch. If you see something, you report it. You do not fire unless you or your team are in immediate danger. Is that clear?" "Clear, sir." Keene turned from the window, her voice cutting in smooth and even. "The disappearances follow a pattern. All 5 happened within a 2-mile radius of this creek bed." She pointed to a thin blue line snaking through the map. "No bodies have been recovered. No blood, no clothing, no signs of struggle. It's as if these people walked into the woods and stopped existing." "What about animals?" Dunn asked, not looking up from his radio. "Bear attacks, mountain lions?" "Possible," Keene said, "but unlikely." The state wildlife department checked the area twice. No predator activity, no territorial markings, nothing. Whatever is taking these people isn't leaving evidence. The room went quiet except for the rain hammering on the roof. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The kind you get when you know you're walking into something bad, but you don't have a choice. Holt rolled up the map and handed it to Keene. "We move out at 6 p.m. Get your gear ready. And remember, this operation doesn't exist. No calls home, no letters, no loose talk. As far as anyone knows, we're running training exercises in the Virginia hills. We walked out into the rain, and I caught Lasker staring back at the building like he was trying to memorize the way out. I clapped him on the shoulder. "Relax, kid. It's just reconnaissance." He looked at me with those young eyes, still untouched by the kind of fear that sticks with you. "You ever done anything like this before?" "Once or twice," I lied. Truth was, none of us had. This wasn't reconnaissance. This was something else entirely. By 6 p.m., we were loaded into 2 Humvees, rolling down a dirt road that barely qualified as a trail. The Pine Barrens stretched out on either side of us, thick and dark. The trees so thick you couldn't see more than a few yards into them. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the fog had rolled in heavy, clinging to the ground like something alive. Dunn sat in the back with me, his radio crackling with static as he tried to find a clear frequency. "Anything?" I asked. He shook his head. "Interference. Could be the weather. Could be the terrain. We'll get a clearer signal once we're set up on the ridge." Lasker was up front with the driver, his rifle propped between his knees, his eyes locked on the road ahead. Keen rode in the lead vehicle with Holt and the rest of Alpha Team. I watched her through the rear window, her silhouette sharp against the dim interior light. She was reading something, a file maybe, her face showing no emotion. We reached the drop point just after nightfall. The ridge overlooked a shallow valley, the kind of place where sound carried strange and distance played tricks on your eyes. Holt split us up. Alpha Team moved north, Charlie south. That left me, Dunn, and Lasker to hold the middle. Bravo Team, the quiet spot, the safe spot. Or so we thought. We set up in a clearing just wide enough for a tarp and some basic gear. Dunn strung an antenna between 2 trees while Lasker and I dug a shallow trench for drainage. The ground was soft, almost spongy, like it hadn't been dry in weeks. The smell hit me then, faint but clear. Rot. Not the sharp stink of a dead animal, but something older, deeper, like the earth itself was decaying. "You smell that?" Lasker asked, wrinkling his nose. "Probably just the swamp," I said, though I didn't believe it. The Pine Barrens were full of bogs and stagnant water. But this was different. This was wrong. Dunn finished with the antenna and powered up the radio. Static filled the air. Then a voice crackled through. "Bravo, this is Alpha. Radio check." "Alpha, Bravo." "Loud and clear," Dunn replied. "Roger. Maintain position. First check-in at 8 p.m. Alpha out." The line went dead and the forest pressed in around us. We settled into our positions, rifles within reach, eyes scanning the tree line. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving only the sound of water dripping from branches and the occasional rustle of wind through dead leaves. Hours passed. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. It was the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. The kind that makes you start hearing things that aren't there. At 8 p.m., Dunn keyed the mic. "Alpha, Bravo. Situation report. Negative. No activity." "Roger, Bravo." Charlie reports the same. "Stay sharp." Another 2 hours crawled by. Lasker shifted beside me, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. "How long are we supposed to sit here?" "As long as it takes," I said. "This is terrible," he muttered. 5 people disappear and they send us out here to stare at trees." "5 people we know about," Dunn said quietly, his eyes still on the radio. "Could be more." Lasker went still. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the brass doesn't send out a unit like this for 5 missing hikers. There's something else going on. Something they're not telling us." Before I could respond, a sound cut through the silence. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A scream, high-pitched, panicked, human. It echoed through the valley and died just as quickly as it started. We froze, rifles coming up instinctively. Dunn grabbed the radio. "Alpha, Bravo, did you copy that?" "Static." "Alpha, come in." More static. Then a voice, distorted and broken. "Bravo, stand by." The line went dead again. My heart hammered in my chest. Lasker's hands were shaking, his knuckles white on the grip of his rifle. What the heck was that? Could be an animal, I said, though I knew better. That wasn't an animal. That was a person. And they were terrified. Dunn tried the radio again. Charlie, Bravo. Do you copy? Nothing. Charlie, this is Bravo. Respond. The static hissed and popped. Then a new sound bled through. Low, guttural. Almost like breathing. It wasn't words, wasn't even close. But it had rhythm. It had intent. Dunn's face went pale. He twisted the dial, trying to clear the frequency. But the sound persisted. Then it stopped. The radio fell silent. The forest fell silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Lasker whispered, "What the heck is happening?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. But every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of those woods. To run, to leave, to never look back. Instead, I tightened my grip on my rifle and stared into the darkness, waiting for whatever was out there to make the first move. And that's when I saw them. 2 pinpoints of red light, glowing faint in the distance, just beyond the tree line. Eyes watching us, unblinking, unwavering, locked on. Dunn saw them too, his breath caught. Jesus Christ. The lights didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that whatever was out there wasn't an animal. It wasn't human either. It was something else. Something that had been waiting in those woods long before we arrived. And now it knew we were here. The red lights hung in the darkness like embers suspended in oil. They didn't move, didn't flicker, just burned with a cold intensity that made my skin crawl. I brought my rifle up slowly, finger resting on the trigger guard, trying to steady my breathing. Beside me, Lasker was frozen, his mouth half open, his eyes locked on the glow. "Range," I whispered. "Maybe 60 yards, Dunn said, his voice tight. "Could be closer. Hard to tell in this fog." "You see a body?" "No, just the eyes." I scanned the area around the lights, looking for movement, for shape, for anything that would tell me what I was looking at. The fog swirled between the trees, thick and gray, hiding everything below chest height. But those eyes stayed fixed, burning through the mist like they were looking straight into my skull. "Bravo, this is Alpha. Report." Holt's voice crackled through the radio, sharp and demanding. Dunn grabbed the handset, his hands shaking. "Alpha, Bravo. We have visual contact. 2 red lights about 60 yards northeast of our position. No movement. No identification." Pause, static hiss. Then Holt's voice came back, slower, more careful. "Describe the lights." "Red, bright, raised about 6 feet off the ground." "They're not moving, sir. Just watching." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear voices in the background, muffled and urgent. Then Keen's voice cut through, cold and precise. "Bravo. Hold your position. Do not engage. Do not use your lights. Observe and report any changes. Alpha is moving to your location. Time of arrival, 10 minutes. "Roger," Dunn said, but his voice cracked on the word. 10 minutes in the dark, with those eyes staring at us. My pulse hammered in my ears. I forced myself to breathe slow and controlled, the way they taught us in training. But training didn't cover this. Training was for firefights and ambushes and enemies you could see. This was something else entirely. Lasker shifted beside me, raising his rifle. "I can take the shot." "Negative," I hissed. "Orders are to hold. What if it moves? Then we track it. But we don't fire unless it's a threat." "It is a threat," he said, his voice rising. "Look at it. That's not natural. That's not." "Shut up and hold your position," I snapped. He went quiet, but I could feel the tension radiating off him like heat. The kid was scared. Heck, we all were, but fear makes you stupid and stupid gets you killed. I kept my eyes on the lights, watching for any shift, any change. Seconds stretched into minutes. The fog thickened. The air felt heavier, pressing down on us like a wet blanket. And still those eyes didn't move. Then, without warning, they blinked. Not a slow droop of eyelids, but a sudden mechanical snap. There 1 second, gone the next, then back again. My stomach dropped. Lasker cursed under his breath. Dunn grabbed the radio. Alpha, the lights just blinked. Still no movement. Copy. Stay calm. We're almost there. The lights shifted. Not much, just a slight tilt to the left, like whatever was behind them had cocked its head. Then they rose, slowly, smoothly, climbing higher until they were 8, maybe 9 feet off the ground. My throat tightened. Nothing natural stood that tall. Nothing natural moved like that. It's standing up, Lasker whispered. Alpha, the contact is mobile, Dunn said into the radio, his voice barely controlled. Lights are now raised 9 feet. Still no body visible. Hold your position. Do not engage. The lights began to move. Not toward us, but sideways, drifting left through the trees with an unnatural smoothness. No bobbing, no swaying, just a steady glide like it was floating. I tracked it with my rifle, keeping the barrel aligned with the glow. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Where's it going? Lasker asked. I don't know. Just keep eyes on it. The lights moved deeper into the woods, weaving between tree trunks, never breaking their steady pace. Then they stopped. For a moment they hung there, suspended in the fog, and then they turned. Slowly, deliberately, they rotated back toward us. And in that instant I felt it. Not just fear, but recognition. Whatever was out there knew we were watching. It knew we were armed, and it didn't care. A branch snapped behind us. We spun, rifles up, scanning the tree line at our backs. Nothing, just darkness and fog and the faint rustle of wind. My pulse spiked. Dunn keyed the radio again. Alpha, we have possible second contact to our rear. Request immediate support. Copy. 2 minutes out. 2 minutes. Might as well have been 2 hours. I backed up slowly, trying to keep both directions in view. Lasker was breathing hard now, his rifle swinging between the trees like he was looking for something to shoot. There's nothing there, he said, more to himself than to us. There's nothing there. But he was wrong. I could feel it. The air had changed. The pressure had shifted. Something was moving in the dark, circling us, testing us. And then I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like air being forced through a narrow pipe. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing off the trees, vibrating in my chest. It wasn't a growl. It wasn't a roar. It was something in between, something that didn't belong to any animal I'd ever heard. What the heck is that? Lasker's voice was shrill now, panic bleeding through. Hold your fire, I said, but my own voice was shaking. The sound grew louder, deeper, vibrating through the ground beneath our boots. And then the smell hit us. That same rotting stench from before, but stronger now, thick enough to taste. It crawled into my nose, my mouth, coating the back of my throat with something foul and ancient. Lasker gagged. Dunn covered his face with his sleeve. The red lights reappeared, closer this time, 20 yards, maybe less. And now I could see more than just the eyes. There was a shape behind them, massive and dark, blending into the shadows. Broad shoulders, long arms, a head that sat too low on the body, tilted at an angle that made my skin crawl. It stood perfectly still, watching us, waiting. Contact front, I said into the radio, my voice barely above a whisper. 20 yards. Visual confirmed. Hold your position. Alpha is on sight. I heard the crunch of boots on wet ground. Voices. Holt's team emerged from the fog, rifles raised, moving in a tight formation. Holt took point, his face grim, his eyes locked on the shape in the trees. He raised a fist, signaling a halt. Everyone froze. For a long moment, nobody moved. We stood there in the rain-soaked dark, staring at the thing that stared back at us. Holt slowly lowered his rifle and pulled a flashlight from his belt. I'm lighting it up, he said quietly. Nobody fires unless I give the order. He clicked the light on. The beam cut through the fog, sweeping across the trees, searching for the source of the glow. The red lights flared brighter, almost blinding, then vanished. Just gone. The beam landed on an empty patch of forest. No body, no shape, nothing. Holt moved forward, flashlight steady. Spread out, eyes open. We advanced in a line, rifles up, every step careful. The fog clung to us, damp and heavy, muffling our movements. Holt reached the spot where the lights had been and stopped. He crouched down, running his hand over the ground. When he stood up, his face was pale. "What is it?" Keen asked, stepping up beside him. He held up his hand. His fingers were covered in something dark and sticky. Not mud, not water. Blood, fresh blood, still warm. And beneath it, pressed into the soft earth, was a print. Not a boot, not a paw, something else. 5 toes, clawed, massive. Keen pulled a camera from her pack and started snapping photos. Holt wiped his hand on his pants and looked at me. "You saw it. What did it look like?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. What could I say? That it was 9 feet tall. That it moved like smoke. That it had eyes like burning coals. None of it made sense. None of it fit. "Big," I finally said. "Bigger than any man. And it knew we were here." Holt's jaw tightened. He looked at Keen. "Get command on the line. Tell them we need extraction and a full investigation team." This just became something else. She nodded and moved back toward the radio. Holt turned to the rest of us. "We hold this position until support arrives. No one goes off alone. No one fires unless I give the order. And for God's sake, keep your eyes open." But I couldn't shake the feeling that it didn't matter, that whatever was out there had already seen us, already marked us, and no amount of firepower was going to change what came next. They were once human. We sat in that clearing for 3 hours, waiting for extraction that never came. The radio crackled with static and broken transmissions, Keen's voice growing more frustrated with each failed attempt to reach command. The fog had thickened to the point where you couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction, and the temperature had dropped enough that our breath hung in the air like ghosts. Holt paced the perimeter, his flashlight cutting thin lines through the mist. Every few minutes he'd stop and listen, head cocked, searching for sounds that didn't belong. The rest of us formed a loose circle, backs to each other, rifles pointed outward. Lasker kept glancing at the blood-stained ground where the print had been, his face pale in the dim light of our chem sticks. "Command's not responding," Keen said finally, lowering the radio handset. "I'm getting carrier signal, but no voice, just interference." "Same interference as before?" Holt asked. "Worse. It's like something's blocking the frequency." Dunn looked up from his own radio. "That's not possible out here. We're running military-grade encryption on multiple channels. You'd need serious hardware to block all of them at the same time." "Well, someone or something is doing it," Keen said sharply. "We're cut off." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Cut off. Alone in the dark with something that left 9-foot tracks and eyes that burned red. Holt stopped pacing and turned to face us. His expression was hard, controlled, the kind of look that comes from years of making decisions other people don't want to make. "We're pulling back to the vehicles," he said. "Charlie team, you take point. Bravo middle. Alpha brings up the rear. We move in formation. Weapons hot. No talking unless you see something. If we get separated, meeting point is the staging area where we loaded in. Everyone understand?" We nodded. Nobody argued. Nobody suggested we stay and wait it out because deep down we all felt it. That basic instinct that tells you when you're being hunted, when you're no longer the predator but the prey. We moved out in a tight column, boots squelching in the mud. The fog seemed to move with us, pressing in from all sides, turning the forest into a maze of gray shadows and black shapes. Every tree looked the same. Every sound felt too close. I kept my rifle up, my finger resting on the trigger guard, my eyes scanning left and right in a constant rhythm. Lasker walked in front of me, his shoulders hunched, his breathing rapid and shallow. The kid was on the edge, one bad sound away from breaking. I wanted to tell him to calm down, to stay focused, but my own nerves were strung so tight I could barely keep my thoughts straight. We'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps, wood on wood, echoing through the trees. We stopped. Everyone froze. The sound came again, louder this time. From somewhere to our left, then an answer from the right. 2 knocks. Then 3 more from behind us. "They're surrounding us," someone whispered. Holt raised his fist, signaling silence. We stood there in the fog, listening. The knocking continued, circling us, moving through the trees with impossible speed. It wasn't random. It was coordinated, deliberate, like a language. "Move," Holt said quietly. Double time. We picked up the pace, half jogging through the undergrowth, branches whipping at our faces. The knocking followed us, always just out of sight, always close enough to make your heart race. And then came the smell, that rotting, ancient stench rolling through the fog like a physical thing. It hit us all at once, thick and choking. Lasker stumbled, gagging. One of the guys from Charlie team dropped to his knees and vomited. "Keep moving," Holt barked. "Don't stop." But we did stop because right there, directly in our path, standing in the middle of the trail, was a shape. Tall, impossibly tall, broad-shouldered and hunched, covered in something dark and matted that might have been fur or hair or something worse. And those eyes, God, those eyes, glowing red, fixed on us with an intelligence that made my blood run cold. Nobody fired. Nobody moved. We just stood there, staring at it, and it stared back. I could see details now that I hadn't seen before. The way its chest rose and fell with slow, careful breaths. The length of its arms, hanging almost to its knees. The shape of its head, stretched out and wrong, like someone had stretched a skull and pulled it out of proportion. Holt's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. "Keen, document this." She raised her camera, hands shaking, and snapped a photo. The flash went off like lightning, lighting up the creature in harsh detail for a split second. Massive, muscular, covered in coarse, dark hair, face partially hidden in shadow. But I caught a glimpse of something pale beneath the fur. Skin, human skin. The creature didn't flinch, didn't react, just watched us. And then it opened its mouth, not to roar, not to growl, to speak. The sound that came out was wrong. A garbled, wet, clicking noise that rose and fell in something like rhythm. It wasn't English. It wasn't any language I'd ever heard. But it was language, structure, intent, and beneath it, layered like an echo, I heard something else. A voice, human, male, whispering words I couldn't quite make out. Lasker broke. He raised his rifle and fired. 3 quick bursts. Muzzle flash lighting up the fog. The rounds hit center mass. I saw the impact. Saw the creature's body jerk. But it didn't fall. It didn't even stagger. It just tilted its head like it was curious. And then it moved. Fast. Faster than anything that size had any right to move. 1 second it was 20 yards away. The next it was on us. Crashed into Charlie team like a truck, swatting rifles aside like toys. Men screamed. Gunfire erupted, wild and panicked. I raised my weapon and fired, squeezing the trigger in controlled bursts, aiming for the head, the chest, anywhere that might stop it. Nothing worked. It grabbed one of the Charlie guys by the vest and hurled him into a tree. The sound of the impact made my stomach turn. Bone and bark and a wet crunch that echoed through the fog. Holt was shouting orders, trying to coordinate fire, but it was chaos. Pure, brutal chaos. The creature turned toward me. Those red eyes locked on mine. And in that moment, I saw something behind them. Not just rage or hunger, recognition. Like it knew me, like it remembered me. My finger froze on the trigger. My breath caught in my chest. And then Dunn tackled me from the side, dragging me behind a fallen log just as a massive hand swept through the space where my head had been. "Stay down," Dunn hissed, shoving me into the mud. The creature moved through our formation like a wrecking ball, scattering men, destroying equipment. Someone threw a flare, and the red light painted everything in hellish shadows. I saw its face then, fully lit, and I wished I hadn't. Beneath the hair, beneath the twisted features, I saw traces of something human. A nose, a mouth, eyes that didn't belong to any animal. It roared. A sound so deep and so loud it felt like my ribs were cracking. And then it vanished, just melted back into the fog, leaving us bleeding and broken and gasping for air. The forest went silent. No birds, no wind, just the sound of men groaning and the crackle of the flare burning out. Holt pulled himself to his feet, blood running down his face from a gash above his eye. Sound off. Who's hit? Voices called out, shaky and hoarse. 2 men down, 1 unconscious, 1 barely breathing. Lasker was on his knees, dry heaving into the dirt. Keen sat against a tree, clutching her camera like it was a lifeline, her eyes wide and unfocused. We need to move, Holt said. Now, before it comes back. Comes back. Lasker's voice cracked. That thing took 30 rounds and didn't even slow down. What the heck are we supposed to do? We get to the vehicles and we get out. That's the mission. The mission. Lasker stood up, his face twisted with anger and fear. The mission is suicide. We're not equipped for this. We don't even know what that thing is. Doesn't matter, Holt said. We move or we die. Your choice. We moved, carrying the wounded, half dragging them through the mud and undergrowth. Every shadow looked like it was moving. Every sound made us flinch. The fog clung to us like it was alive, pulling at our clothes, filling our lungs with cold, damp air that tasted like rust and rot. We'd covered maybe half a mile when Keen grabbed my arm. Stop. What? Listen. I stopped. Everyone stopped. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, careful, coming from behind us. Multiple sets, not running, walking like they had all the time in the world, like they knew we couldn't escape. How many? Holt asked. Dunn was already working the thermal scope, sweeping the area behind us. His face went white. 4, maybe 5, spread out in a line, moving parallel to us. They're hurting us, Keen said quietly. Holt's jaw tightened. Then we don't go where they want us to go. We cut west, straight through the thickest part of the forest. If we're lucky, the terrain will slow them down. And if we're not lucky? Lasker asked. Holt didn't answer. He just started walking. We followed. What else could we do? The forest grew denser. The trees pressing in so close we had to move in single file. Branches scraped our faces. Roots caught our boots. And the footsteps kept pace. Always just out of sight, always close enough to hear. Then we found the bodies. They were hanging from the trees. 5 of them, the missing hikers, strung up by their wrists with rope made from twisted vines. Their feet dangling 6 feet off the ground. Eyes open, mouths frozen in silent screams. And they were fresh. Blood still dripping from wounds that looked like they'd been made by claws. Keen turned away and vomited. Lasker just stared, his rifle hanging limp in his hands. I forced myself to look, to take in every detail, because I knew if I didn't, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if it had been real. Holt moved forward slowly, his flashlight sweeping over the bodies. Cut them down. Sir, we don't have time. Cut them down, he repeated, his voice hard as iron. They're American citizens. We don't leave them hanging like trophies. We worked fast, using knives to saw through the vines. The bodies fell with wet thuds, crumpling into the mud. I tried not to look at their faces, but I couldn't help it. They died terrified. Whatever had taken them hadn't been quick or merciful. As we laid the last body down, Dunn whispered, "Contact. 30 yards. Dead ahead." I looked up. There, standing in a semicircle around us, were 5 figures. Tall, broad, eyes glowing red in the darkness. They didn't move, didn't make a sound, just watched us with that same terrible intelligence. And then from somewhere behind them came a voice, human, clear, speaking perfect English. "You shouldn't have come here." My blood turned to ice. Holt raised his rifle, but his hands were shaking. "Who's there? Identify yourself." The voice laughed, a dry, rasping sound that didn't belong to anything living. "You already know who I am. You've been looking at me all night." One of the figures stepped forward. The red eyes burned brighter, and in the faint glow, I saw its face, twisted, wrong. But underneath the deformity, underneath the hair and the scarring, I recognized the features. It was human, or it had been once. "My name was Corporal Thomas Ridley," the voice said. "And this forest is our home now. You're trespassing." Holt's rifle wavered. "That's impossible. Ridley's been dead for 20 years. "No," the voice said softly. "I've been waiting. And now you're here, just like the others. The figures moved closer, slowly, deliberately, surrounding us, and I realized with cold, crushing certainty that we weren't getting out of these woods. Not tonight, maybe not ever. The forest never forgets. Corporal Thomas Ridley. I'd heard the name before, whispered in the kind of stories soldiers tell after too many beers. A reconnaissance team that went missing in the Pine Barrens back in 1975 during a classified operation. 6 men walked into the forest. None walked out. The official report called it a training accident, blamed bad weather and poor navigation. But the rumors said something else. They said the forest took them, changed them, made them into something that wasn't quite human anymore. Standing there in the fog, staring at the thing that claimed to be Ridley, I wanted to believe it was lying, that this was some kind of trick, some psychological warfare designed to break us. But the voice was too clear, too articulate, and those eyes, burning red in the darkness, held too much awareness to belong to a simple animal. Holt's voice cut through my thoughts, steady despite the tremor in his hands. If you're Ridley, then you know I can't let you keep doing this. The people you killed, the hikers, they were innocent. The figure tilted its head, and I heard that wet clicking sound again, like bones grinding together. When it spoke, the voice came from somewhere deep in its chest. Innocent. They came into our territory. They ignored the warnings. Just like you. What warnings? Keen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The disappearances, the stories, the fear that keeps most people away. But you soldiers, you never listen. You think your guns and your training make you safe. The creature's lips pulled back, revealing teeth that were too long, too sharp. They don't. Lasker raised his rifle, his whole body shaking. Stay back. I'm warning you. Lower your weapon, Private, Holt said quietly. Sir, we can't just. Lower your weapon. Lasker hesitated, then slowly brought the barrel down. The creatures hadn't moved, but I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. One wrong move and they'd be on us. And this time we wouldn't survive. What do you want? Holt asked. Ridley's form shifted, the massive shoulders rolling like he was working out a kink. We want you to leave. Take your dead, take your wounded, and never come back. This forest is ours. We've earned it through blood and transformation. You have no claim here. And if we refuse? The creature's eyes flared brighter. Then you'll join us or you'll feed us. The choice is yours. Keen stepped forward, her camera still clutched in her hands. What happened to you? How did you become this? For a moment, Ridley was silent. The fog swirled around him, and I could see more details now in the faint glow of our chem sticks. His body was massive, easily 9 feet tall, covered in coarse hair that might have once been human, but had grown wild and thick. His hands were enormous, fingers ending in curved claws that looked like they could tear through steel. But it was his face that haunted me, stretched and distorted, yes, but still recognizable as human. Still carrying the ghost of whoever he'd been before. We were exposed, he said finally. Chemical weapons testing classified project. They told us it was safe, that the compounds would disappear within hours. They lied. His voice grew harder, angrier. 3 days after exposure, we started changing. Bones stretching, muscles tearing and reforming. The pain was unbearable. We radioed for extraction, for medical support. They told us to hold position. That help was coming. But it never did. They abandoned you, Keen said softly. No, they left us here to die, to become monsters. And when we realized what we'd become, when we understood we could never go back, we made a choice. We claimed this forest. We became its guardians. And we've been here ever since, keeping people away, protecting ourselves from a world that would hunt us. Holt lowered his rifle completely, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Sympathy, maybe even understanding. I'm sorry that happened to you, but you've killed innocent people, children, families. That's not protection, that's murder. Is it? Ridley's voice turned cold. When a bear kills someone who wanders into its territory, do you call it murder? We are what your government made us. We didn't ask for this. We didn't choose it, but we will defend what's ours. The other creatures moved closer, forming a tighter circle. I could smell them now, that overwhelming stench of rot and musk. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. We were surrounded. Dunn's voice crackled over the radio, barely audible through the static. I'm picking up multiple heat signatures, closing in from all sides. How many? Holt asked without taking his eyes off Ridley. At least a dozen, maybe more. A dozen. We were 8 men, 2 wounded, with limited ammunition and no backup. The math was simple and brutal. We couldn't fight our way out and we couldn't outrun them, which meant we had one option left. We'll leave, Holt said. We'll take our people and go, and we won't come back. Ridley studied him for a long moment, those red eyes burning with an intensity that made my skin crawl. You swear this on your honor as a soldier? I swear it. And the government, they'll send others. Not if I have anything to say about it. This operation doesn't exist. The people we lost will be listed as training casualties. The report will be buried so deep nobody will ever find it. You have my word. Another long silence. The fog pressed in, thick and cold. Somewhere in the distance, I heard that knocking sound again, wood on wood, echoing through the trees, a signal, a warning, or maybe just a reminder that we were being watched. Finally, Ridley stepped back. Go now, before I change my mind. We didn't need to be told twice. Holt gestured and we moved, carrying the wounded, keeping our rifles up but not aimed. The creatures melted back into the fog, disappearing as silently as they'd appeared. But I could feel them watching us, following us, making sure we kept our word. The trek back to the vehicles took over an hour. Nobody spoke. Nobody looked back. We just walked, one foot in front of the other, focusing on the simple act of moving forward. When we finally broke through the tree line and saw the Humvees waiting in the clearing, I felt something in my chest release. Not relief, not quite, but close enough. We loaded the wounded first, then the bodies of the hikers. Keen sat in the back of the lead vehicle, staring at her camera like she was trying to decide whether to smash it or hold on to it forever. Lasker climbed into the driver's seat without a word, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Holt was the last one in. He stood at the edge of the clearing, looking back into the forest. I moved up beside him. You think they'll stay? I asked. I don't know, but I meant what I said. This operation ends here. No follow-up, no investigation. We bury it and move on. And if command asks questions, then I'll handle command. He turned to me, his face grim. What we saw tonight, it doesn't leave this team. Understood. Understood. He nodded and climbed into the vehicle. I took one last look at the forest, at the wall of trees that had swallowed so many people and spit out nightmares. The fog was lifting now, pale morning light filtering through the branches. It looked almost peaceful, almost normal. But I knew better. I'd seen what lived in those shadows, and I knew I'd never forget it. We drove out in convoy, following the dirt road back to the staging area. The rain had started again, a light drizzle that washed the mud from our boots and the blood from our uniforms. By the time we reached the main road, the sun was coming up, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lieutenant Keene worked the radio the entire drive, finally reaching someone at command. Her voice was calm and professional as she delivered the report. Training accident, multiple casualties, request for immediate medical and mortuary support. She didn't mention the creatures, didn't mention Ridley, didn't mention anything that would make someone ask the wrong questions. When we arrived at the base, there were medics waiting. They took the wounded without comment, loading them into ambulances with practiced efficiency. The bodies of the hikers were zipped into bags and carried away. Someone handed me a cup of coffee. I drank it without tasting it. Holt gathered us in the same prefab building where this had all started. Felt like a lifetime ago. He stood at the front, his face haggard, his uniform torn and stained. The official story is simple. We encountered a black bear during a night patrol. The bear attacked, causing multiple injuries and fatalities. We neutralized the threat and extracted. The missing persons cases are now closed. The families will be notified. That's it. That's it, Lasker asked. We just lie. We survive, Holt said. We protect ourselves and we protect them. Because the truth won't help anyone. It'll just get more people killed. Nobody argued. We were too tired, too broken, too haunted by what we'd seen. Over the next few days, we were debriefed individually. Same questions, same answers. Black Bear, training accident, standard protocol. They separated us after that, reassigning us to different units, different bases, different parts of the country, making sure we couldn't compare stories, couldn't collaborate, couldn't remember together. I saw Dunn one more time before he shipped out. He looked older, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with age. You ever think about going back? He asked. Every day, I said. But I won't. Yeah, me neither. We shook hands and never spoke again. I finished my enlistment 6 months later and walked away from the military. Tried to build a normal life, got a job, got married, had kids. But the dreams never stopped. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, covered in sweat, convinced I could smell that rotting stench, convinced I could hear knocking in the walls. Years passed, decades. I tried to forget, tried to convince myself it had been shock, hallucination, some kind of mass hysteria brought on by stress and fear. But then I'd see a news story. Another disappearance in the Pine Barrens. Another hiker who never came home. And I'd know they're still there. Ridley and whatever remains of his team, still guarding their territory, still protecting their secret. And somewhere in a filing cabinet, in a government building that doesn't officially exist, there's a report marked classified. A report that will never be opened, never be investigated, never be believed, because some secrets are meant to stay buried. Some monsters are meant to stay hidden, and some forests are meant to keep their dead. I'm telling you this story now because I'm old and I'm tired and I can't carry it alone anymore. If you're reading this, if you're hearing this, then you need to understand something. The Pine Barrens are dangerous. Not because of what lives there, but because of what we made, what we abandoned, what we refused to acknowledge. So if you ever find yourself driving through Point Pleasant, New Jersey on a foggy autumn night, and you hear knocking in the trees, don't answer it. Don't investigate. Don't try to be a hero. Just keep driving. Because some things are better left alone. Some horrors are better left unseen, and some soldiers never really come home. They just learn to live with the ghosts. I learned that lesson in 1995 in a forest that breathed, under a sky that watched, surrounded by creatures that were once men. And if I close my eyes right now, I can still see them. Those red eyes in the darkness, watching, waiting, remembering. The operation was officially closed. The files were sealed. The truth was buried. But the eyes never blinked. The forest never forgot. And somewhere in the Pine Barrens, they're still out there. Still watching. Still waiting.